Welcome back, everyone. We're now going to resume hearing evidence from Mr. David Jones. I'll begin by checking that Mr. Jones can see me and hear me well. Mr. Jones, good afternoon.
Yes, I can.
Good, thank you very much. And are you ready to continue? Is there anything you want to raise first?
No, I'm ready to carry on.
Very good. In that case, I'll invite Ms. Troop to go on with her questions. Yes, Ms. Troop.
Thank you. Mr. Jones, I want to take us forward a little in the timeline. So I'm going to ask you to look now at an email, which is at LABC 302281. It's a series of emails, rather, from January 2009. If we go to the second email in the chain, please, which is yours. You sent an email to Phil Harrison at the LABC on the 14th of January 2009 at 11:07. Do you see it?
Yes, I do.
I just want to read through that with you. You say, "Dear Phil, I've been following up on your email below with regard to a type approval for Kingspan's rain screen cladding insulation board. And if I understand the process correctly, I now need to pass it back to LABC for an invoice to be raised, etc. I met with Andrew Pack before Christmas to discuss what we could offer them through the type approval scheme and suggested that, in view of the scope of the certificate, the minimum fee of £500 would be adequate. He was keen to proceed with this after our meeting, and so I've since carried on and done the necessary work to produce the certificate, though I haven't forwarded anything on to Andrew as yet." Just pausing there, on what basis had you determined at that stage that the minimum fee for your work of £500 would be adequate?
I believe that was based on the original brief given to me by LABC, the subsequent discussion with Kingspan about what they wanted, and sort of a final agreement that yes, that scope is. Everybody had a common understanding then that was the scope and that was the fee that would be done. And I believe, going back further, I'm sure there were conversations with LABC where the minimum fee was discussed, on the basis that actually you're not going any further than the BBA certificate, so it's not going to be a long drawn out process.
Yeah, so it was fairly straightforward. So in your mind, the minimum fee was appropriate. Is that it?
For what had been asked of us, yes.
If we go on in that email, you say, this is at the third paragraph, the most we can really offer in this case would be a product approval. K15 is just the insulation component of the rain screen walling system. Both the inner structural frame and the rain screen cladding itself are unknown variables produced by a third party, and so a system approval would be impossible to pin down. I did emphasize this to Andrew to be clear that the type approval would not go any further than the current BBA certificate, but he was happy that it would still be worthwhile, if only to get the LABC seal of approval. And so again, just pausing there, I think that accords, would you say, with what you have told us about Kingspan's aim in having their product associated with the LABC brand? It was a marketing aim.
Yes, I think that it does sort of support that, and also shows that I'm still wrangling over this this difference between product and system at this stage.
It does, doesn't it? Because in that paragraph, if we look at the third line, you've actually said a system approval would be impossible to pin down.
Yes.
So can I take it from that, given that by the time the certificate was issued, it was in fact a system approval, that you had done further work and you had developed your thinking further and found a way forward to make it into a system approval?
No, because the report that I'm forwarding to Phil Harrison under cover of this email is the same report that went to them finally for consideration against the certificate. So the report my report as we've seen it was already in existence at this stage. But I think throughout it was always in my mind a product approval. And even though ultimately it came out from LABC on a form titled system approval, to me, it was still essentially a product approval in that how could it be anything else? Because only one product is actually defined in it. And I think that the fact that the certificate was titled system approval comes back to this original point of LABC that the terminology is all wrong. We have to call it system approval because that's what our forms say.
Yes. Would you agree, despite the fact that to you it was always a product approval, that that would not be apparent to a reader of the certificate?
Reading it now, I can see that, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Where LABC perhaps said, don't worry about it, we're going to be revamping this soon, but just go with what you've got. Actually, we shouldn't have done that. It should have been made clearer that we were just talking about a product.
When did you come to determine that, Mr. Jones, that it should have been made clearer and it shouldn't have been done in this way?
I think that's more over the last year and a half in seeing perhaps how the certificate was used after it sort of left LABC and what Kingspan were doing with it.
Yes. All right, if we can go on in this email, if we could scroll down, or if we start at the final paragraph, we can see there, you go on to give Mr. Harrison an outline of how you intend to approach your summary, and you say this: I would suggest then that the type approval certificate be for K15 as part of a generic but undefined system, and refer to the following documents, all attached: our summary of building regs compliance issues considered, and then if we can go on down, please, BBA certificate 084582, Kingspan's own literature. I would be grateful if you could let me know what the next step should be. Yes?
Yes. Yeah.
And attached to this was your type approval summary, was it?
Yes.
Right. If we can go up then, please, to Mr. Harrison's response to you, which is at the top of page 1. He says there, and this is the 19th of January, good morning, Dave. Attached for your use as agreed are the latest versions of a type approval application form and the compliance declaration. Thank you for sorting this out so thoroughly. Did you take from this email approval by the LABC of the work you had done?
I did at that stage, yes. Although knowing that I was sending them the type approval at this stage for the first time, I obviously knew that the checking process hadn't yet occurred. So I knew that was still to come.
I see.
And I imagined that during the course of that process, if any queries arose, then LABC would come back to me to discuss.
Yes. Do you know whether Phil Harrison had a technical role at the LABC?
I didn't know anything much about Phil Harrison's background. His title, I think, was business development, which suggests marketing.
It does.
But I don't know whether he could have been a technical practitioner who went into marketing.
Sure.
I don't know.
All right. I'm sorry, I overspoke you again.
That's okay. I'd finished.
All right. He mentioned in that email a compliance declaration form. He sent that to you. If we can go to that now, please. That's at HBC 6021. And to the second page, please. That is the compliance declaration form, isn't it?
Yes.
Did you fill out the main body of that form?
I believe I did, yes. Yes.
So you would have, I think you've blacked out no or yes as appropriate in the middle section, extent of recommended regulatory approval. Is that right?
Yes.
And if we go to the bottom of that page, please, we can see that the document is unsigned and undated. Did you understand that to be for signature and dating by the LABC? Was it for them to declare compliance or you?
My understanding was that it was for them to declare compliance, because this what I was sending them at this stage still had a number of processes to go through before it became an LABC certificate. So ultimately, compliance would be the sum of all these exercises, including the checking that was still to come. So no, I wouldn't have anticipated when I sent this that this was the be all and end all. This is how it would look. This was just me sending to LABC everything that I'd considered for them to take on board, and for them to check as necessary, and for them to ultimately issue a certificate. I think the fact that it's not signed is more likely to be because I sent it as an electronic document and didn't sign it.
Fine. All right. I want to take you now, please, to the LABC approval certificate and to the summary that you prepared. So if we can go, please, to KIN 405705, please. So that's the certificate itself at page 1, and it's dated in the right top-hand corner, the 1st of May 2009, yes?
Yes.
And just looking through it, at section 1, we see the certificate holder's details. That's obviously Kingspan. And then we see at section 2, system title, description, Kingspan Cooltherm K15 rain screen board. I mean, we've been over this, but K15 is not a system, is it?
No, it's not.
At section 3, if we can move down, halfway through, or at the second subheading in section 3, we see an area called drawings and documentation to be referred to. Do you see that?
Yes. Yeah.
And just to clear it up, the first document referred to in that list, Herefordshire Council Type Approval Summary, Revision 1, 3rd of March 2008. That date, I think you've explained in your witness statement, is a typographical error, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
There was no earlier type approval summary.
No.
That is in fact a reference to your type approval summary from 2009.
That's right, yes. Yeah.
All right, so the two documents we're left with are Kingspan publication, Cooltherm K15 rain screen board, 8th issue, November 2008, and the BBA certificate 084582, dated the 27th of October 2008, yes?
Yes.
If we can go on, please, to page 3, there's actually a blank page at page 2. So if we can go on to page 3, this is the type approval summary, yes?
Yes.
And just to be clear, the wording in this summary, all of it is yours, yes?
Yes.
All right. We see there a section at the start called Overview, which describes the product. Would you agree?
Yes.
And then below that, a heading, the system. We can scroll
Yes.
down a little bit, please. I'd like to look at the whole of that section, the system. So you say here in the opening paragraph that overall wall construction must reflect standard design details as shown in figures 1, 2, and 3 of Kingspan Technical Literature, Cooltherm K15 rain screen board, 8th issue, November 2008. The standard forms of construction contained therein, and as considered under this system approval, would consist of, and then you have 4 bullet points. Am I correct in thinking that what you have done there is explained what can be seen in figures 1, 2, and 3 within Kingspan's marketing literature?
Yes.
If we look at the 4th bullet point, please, a rain screen cladding weathering layer structurally fixed back to the inner substrate, and so on. Those first words, a rain screen cladding weathering layer, could be taken to mean any rain screen cladding. Do you agree?
It could, although I think further on in the document, limit that to a fire performance of limited combustibility.
Yes. And in fact, at the first bullet point, you've specified from Kingspan's marketing literature that the inner substrate needs to be reinforced concrete, masonry, or hollow metal framed walling, forming part of the building's superstructure, yes?
Yes.
Can we go on to the 4th page and to the heading Requirement B? Yes, so if we look at requirement B, fire safety considerations, we see there the words K15 has been tested in accordance with, and you then list 4 test methods, 8414 part 1, 13641, and BS 476 parts 6 and 7. And under that, we see this sentence: from the results, it can be considered as a material of limited combustibility and meets the criteria for class 0 classification for surface spread of flame. Just to be absolutely clear, you had not at any time seen the test results to which you are referring the reader there, had you?
No, I'd copied those out of the BBA certificate, I believe.
And just looking quite strictly at the wording you have used, from the results it can be considered, which of the test standards listed in that section did you consider gave a result that could lead to the class 0 classification you cited? Did you know?
No, the class 0 classification was simply repeating what was stated in the BBA certificate.
But did you know at the time, or do you know now, whether any of those test standards can lead to that classification?
I don't believe I knew fully at the time, but I do know now that the reference to class 0 was misplaced, both on the BBA certificate and repeated here. Or I believe it to be. I'm not.
You believe it to be misplaced?
I don't believe the test results listed there are able to give a class 0 classification.
I might have used the wrong phrase. There are no actual test results listed there. These are simply the test standards, aren't they?
Sorry, the test standards, yes.
No, I'm not correcting, I'm correcting myself. All right, looking at the same wording, from the results it can be considered, which of the test standards listed there did you consider gave a result that could lead to the material being one of limited combustibility?
I think the key one was the BS 8414, where I was being told that here we've put this product into a system test where only limited combustibility will suffice, and it's passed. So as far as those test standards go, it would be the first one, BS 8414, although that wasn't the only thing that led me to the limited combustibility wording. It was a range of factors that I took as a whole to make a judgment.
Yes,
that being one of them.
Yes, we'll come on to those factors. By the time this certificate was issued, had you looked up or read any one of those test standards?
No.
If we go on to page 5 now, please. Yes, at the top there's a section entitled Requirement B for External Fire Spread. And I'm going to read that with you, the first paragraph certainly. Since K15 can be considered a material of limited combustibility, it is suitable for use in all situations shown on diagram 40 of approved document B, volume 2, including those parts of a building more than 18 meters above the ground. In the latter circumstances, the cladding system and the substrate to which the insulation is applied must also meet the requirement for limited combustibility. Where the substrate is a metal frame wall system rather than masonry or concrete, a non-combustible lining board must be specified to the external face of the metal frame wall, e.g. calcium silicate board or similar performing. Essentially, you're repeating there what you had said to Mr. Harrison in your email of the 14th of January 2009. And what I mean by that is that since K15 can be considered, I think this is what you mean, since K15 can be considered a material of limited combustibility, and because you're extending this to be some sort of system approval, it is suitable for use over 18 meters as long as all the other components of the external wall arrangement are also materials of limited combustibility. Is that what you intended this to mean?
Yes, I believe so, yes.
All right. Can we go, please, to page 35 of your first witness statement? And we're going to go through now the factors which you have set out, which led you to form a judgment that this was a material of limited combustibility. Yes, the question is at question 57, which test results in specific terms led to the assertion that K15 can be considered a material of limited combustibility? And you start that by saying, as building control surveyors, we were conditioned and expected to gather evidence and use our judgment when considering the compliance or otherwise of building work. Yes?
Yes.
When assessing the combustibility of K15, I considered each of the following. And we'll start with A. You say that the claims about the material and its properties discussed in the initial meeting with Kingspan. Now, I think we've dealt with that meeting in some detail now. Are you able to assist any further as to which claims made in the meeting specifically influenced your decision that K15 could be considered to be a material of limited combustibility?
It's the claims from that meeting that the BS 8414 test pass has been achieved because of K15's combustibility characteristics, as in, when put in that system, it did not burn, or it did not burn to any great degree to cause a risk. So it was that claim that I was referring to in bullet point A there.
Thank you. Going on to B, your second factor is the statement on the first page of the BBA certificate, behaviour in relation to fire. The boards will not contribute to the development stages of a fire or present a smoke or toxic hazard. Just to put it in context, let's get that up, please. The document is BBA 6038, and we need to go to page 1. Yes, so if we just identify this is BBA certificate 084582. And if you look to the left-hand bottom corner, we can see that it's dated the 27th of October, 2008. Do you see that?
Yes.
I think we can agree, can we, that this is the one you saw at the time of your assessment?
Yes, it is.
All right. Looking at this page, do you see under the heading key factors assessed, there are 4 factors listed in bold, yes, and the 4th is behaviour in relation to fire. And I think that is the phrase you're referring to at your paragraph B in your witness statement we've just looked at. The boards will not contribute to the development stages of a fire or present a smoke or toxic hazard. Yes?
Yes.
I understand your evidence is that this particular assertion formed part of your consideration in forming your judgment as to the combustibility or otherwise of the product. Can we go back, please, to page 45 of your first witness statement, where separately you were asked about this particular assertion in the BBA certificate? Yes, it's an inquiry question 78. You were asked about the meaning of it, and you said, I took this to mean that the K15 boards were not capable of burning to an extent where they could contribute towards the development or spread of a fire. This was one of the statements which led me to conclude that K15 was of limited combustibility. Yes?
Yes.
Was this particular factor and that assertion in the BBA certificate something you ever considered taking any advice on, or did you consider it to be sufficiently clear?
It was quite a direct statement, and I took it as it reads. It was very significant to me at that time in terms of this judgment on the combustibility of the product.
Very significant. I'm so sorry, I overspoke you. Go ahead.
Sorry, yes, it was very significant, and I think without that statement, I don't think the other factors I considered would have been enough to make the judgment as to limited combustibility.
I see. So this is the one that sort of swung the balance towards limited combustibility, was it?
Yes, yes.
All right, going back to your list of factors in your witness statement at page 36. If we look at C and D, I'd like to take those together because they go together. If I read those to you, you say, the fact as stated in both the BBA certificate and the Kingspan literature that the product had been successfully tested to BS 8414, it would have been my view at the time that the insulation board would have to be a material of limited combustibility to pass such a test. And then that's essentially repeated in D in respect of BR 135. Do you see?
Yes.
Right. So as far as I know, as far as I understand from your evidence thus far, although you use the plural there in the second line of paragraph D, you were aware, I think, that only one test to 8414 had been carried out on a system incorporating K15.
Yes, I believe that would be right. Yes.
And you understood that BS 8414 was a system test, not a product test.
Yes.
I think you said earlier that you had not understood at the time that it was a system test, meaning that every component, these were not your words, I'm summarizing, but I think you said you had not understood that every component part or the system and every part of it would have to be replicated exactly in order to be used in compliance with approved document B. Is that right?
That's right, yes.
When did you come to understand that the system had to be replicated exactly?
In the last 16 months, while reviewing the matter for this inquiry.
Yes. All right, I want to ask you now about the second sentence, which is mirrored at paragraph C and D. It would have been my view at the time that the insulation board would have to be a material of limited combustibility to pass such a test. And we've referred to this a few times in terms of the meeting that you had with Kingspan. I just want to be absolutely clear. What do you mean by that sentence? The insulation board would have to be a material of limited combustibility to pass such a test.
I think it links to what I was saying of my impression from Kingspan at that meeting, that this principle that the product had been put into a test situation where a limited combustibility material would be a requirement, would be the minimum requirement, and it's passed, it's behaved as it would be expected to be. So I think after that meeting, that gave me the view that it must perform equally to a material of limited combustibility in order to have passed the BS 8414 test.
Now, I would draw a slight distinction between what you've said there. It would have to perform equally to a material of limited combustibility, and the wording in your statement. Do you mean, I just want to be absolutely clear on this, do you mean that you understood that in order to pass a test to 8414, the board would have to be of limited combustibility? Or are you saying, as I think you've just said, that it would have to perform equally to a material of limited combustibility? They're not quite
I'm
the
not sure
same,
of the thought process at that. Sorry?
I'm so sorry, I said they're not quite the same, are they? Do you see?
They're not quite the same. No, you're right. I'm not sure my thought process at that time would have drawn the distinction between the two. But I think if you look at the way I've written at that time in my report to LABC, I've allowed that view to result in the conclusion that it can be treated as a limited combustibility material, not that it's like a material of limited combustibility.
Give me, just to make sure that I haven't misunderstood, I'm not sure you say in the certificate it can be treated as a material of limited combustibility, do you? I think you say it can be considered to be one.
Yeah, yes, that's right. I did.
Right. We spoke earlier about the fact that you referred during your work on this assessment to approved document B, and in particular to section 12, I think. I want to take you to that, please. If we can go to CLG 1607 and to page 95. Mr. Jones, this is approved document B as it stood at the time that you were carrying out your assessment, not as it stands now. So I'm sorry, yes, I think it's coming up. Yes, if we look on the right-hand side of the page towards the bottom under the heading external wall construction, that's paragraph 12.5, we see there the following wording: the external envelope of a building should not provide a medium for fire spread if it is likely to be a risk to health or safety. The use of combustible materials in the cladding system and extensive cavities may present such a risk in tall buildings. External walls should either meet the guidance given in paragraphs 12.6 to 12.9 or meet the performance criteria given in the BRE report BR135 for cladding systems using full-scale test data from BS 8414 Part 1 or Part 2. Yes?
Yes.
So keeping that wording in mind, external walls should either meet the guidance in 12.6 to 12.9 or meet the performance criteria in BR135. Can we go over the page, please, to page 96 within ADB and to paragraph 12.7? And we can see that that is the relevant paragraph for insulation materials. Yes?
Yes.
In a building with a story 18 meters or more above ground level, any insulation product, filler material, not including gaskets, sealants and similar, etc., used in the external wall construction should be of limited combustibility. See Appendix A. And what I want to ask first is this: did you read these two sections at the time you were carrying out your work on this assessment?
I did, yes.
Would you agree with me then that it is clear that these two routes, if I can put it in that way, are alternatives? Either the material is one of limited combustibility or it meets the criteria in BR135.
Yes, I can see that that is the case.
Did you see that that was the case at the time?
I've looked at this repeatedly over the last 14 months and tried to recreate my thought process when looking at this, and I find it difficult to recall how I interpreted it at the time. I think I can only say that I'd never used this section of approved document B before because it related to a type of building and a situation that had never come up for me previously.
Yes.
And I would certainly not go about it in the same way again, but at the time, I'm not sure I wasn't on the right track with it, I would say.
All right. Can I take it that you did not realise at the time that they were alternatives?
I think I realised from the word, or would have realised from the wording of it, that that's two alternative approaches. But I think it appears as if I've mixed and matched a bit there in terms of the limited combustibility term.
Yes.
Which I agree was not the right way to go about it.
All right. We'll come on to that. I mean, in layman's terms, from reading 12.5 taken together with 12.7, if you are clear now that those are posed in the alternative, so either the material is one of limited combustibility or you meet the criteria in BR135 by testing to BS 8414, it follows, doesn't it, that if K15 was a material of limited combustibility, there'd be no need to test it to BS 8414.
No, that would be right.
Did that occur to you at the time?
I'm not sure quite how I thought about it at the time. I think it would have done in that I would have been able to read those paragraphs and understand them at the time. Just wasn't used to applying them in real world situations.
I see. All right, let's go back to your list of factors in your witness statement. If we can go back to page 36, please, and to paragraph E. So this is the next factor that contributed towards your decision to assert that the product was one of limited combustibility. And you say there, the statement in section 7 of the BBA certificate that the product displayed limited fire spread away from the source. So let's go back and look at that, please. It's BBA 6038. We need to go down to page 5 to section 7. The heading there is behaviour in relation to fire. Do you see it?
Yes.
It's quite tricky to find, but if you go to the end of the first quite big paragraph to the final 3 lines, at the third line up from the bottom beginning within, I think that's where that phrase comes from. Within the stated test time, the temperature at the level 2 thermocouples did not exceed 600 degrees, therefore displaying limited fire spread away from the fire source, and that the product meets the criteria stated within BR 135. That is the phrase you're referring to in your factor E, is it?
Yes, yes.
So that is contained within a description there of the way in which the system tested to BS 8414 is said to have met the criteria in BR 135.
Yes.
While we're on this section, this makes clear, does it not, this part of the BBA certificate, that there's one test to BS 8414.
Yes.
And that is to part 1.
Yes.
When you saw that, did it prompt you to look up either part 1 or part 2, or even a summary of the differences between them?
I don't believe it did. I believe I was led by the comment in the third line down, actually the first line, where it refers to a non-combustible substrate. And I think that led my thought process to a more generic non-combustible substrate being the parameter of this test. Yes,
and as far as I understand it from your evidence, that accorded with what you were told by Kingspan when you met with them, did it?
It did, and this was a big part of the process for me, that when I came away from the meeting, what I was seeking to do was go back to the BBA certificate and see if the statements and the impression I'd been given in the meeting could be supported by the BBA certificate, and this was one of the phrases that led me that way and said, yes, okay, that is consistent with what Kingspan was saying.
Yes, I see. This appeared to you on review to be consistent with what either Andrew Pack or Philip Heath or both had told you.
Yes, that's right.
I see. All right. Can we go back to your witness statement now, page 36, and to your factor at F? You say there, the reference in section 7 of the BBA certificate to a BSEN 1364 part 1 test, where an assembly containing K15 achieved a fire resistance of 53 minutes. It would have been my view at the time that the insulation board would have to be a material of limited combustibility to pass such a test to this standard. I don't think we need to go back to that in the BBA certificate. I just want to ask you this. On what basis did you determine that the result of a fire resistance test to BSEN 1364 part 1 could tell you anything at all about the combustibility of a product?
I don't think it didn't directly. I think the paragraph F was just background information. It was just another piece of evidence in the background that suggested this insulation, it didn't readily burn, as I've been given to understand. So I understand that the test standard referred to there had no relevance. It wasn't mentioned at all in section 12 of approved document B, but it was just in terms of gathering as much evidence as I could to try and make a judgment. It was just another bit of background information.
I see. Moving on to G then, you say there, I think this might be the last one, The suggestion in paragraph 7.2 of the BBA certificate that K15 could be suitable for use with stories over 18 metres if the certificate holder, Kingspan, were to say so, and the subsequent statement from Kingspan in their technical literature saying so, that K15 is therefore acceptable for use above 18 metres in accordance with the building regulations. I want to take a look with you, please, at the product literature that was provided to you by Kingspan. That is at KIN 409703. The title of that piece of literature is Cooltherm K15 Rain Screen Board, Insulation for Use Behind Rain Screen Cladding Systems. And if we can just zoom in a little bit on the top right-hand corner, please. We can see that that is the 8th issue dated November 2008, yes?
Yes.
Moving to page 6, please. If we look at the section, it's on the left-hand side about halfway down, entitled Fire Performance. There in the smaller letters still, even smaller letters, we can see 4 test standards listed on the left and result on the right, yes?
Yes.
And under that, we see this. So under those 4 test standards and results, we see the following assertion: Kingspan Cooltherm K15 Rain Screen Board meets the criteria within BR 135, fire performance of external thermal insulation for walls of multi-storey buildings, and is therefore acceptable for use above 18 metres in accordance, if we scroll up a little bit, please, or scroll down a little bit, I mean. In any event, in accordance with the building regulations and standards. Is that the section to which you were referring in your witness statement?
Yes, I have referred to that paragraph, which I think that was, whether consciously or not, instrumental in leading me towards the combustibility approach, because I suppose that there's only one way that Kingspan could make such a blanket statement about the product, and that is to link it to the performance of the product rather than the system. Because that is a blanket statement. Nowhere in that document does it say actually that only applies in certain very limited circumstances. And I think perhaps in my mind I was trying to rationalize that, to say actually in order to say that you've got to be prepared to allocate some characteristics to this product. How can this product be suitable for use in situations above 18 metres on a blanket basis like that, unless we're talking about the combustibility properties of the product.
Yes. Can we go back to that document, please? KIN 409703. When you say blanket statement, that statement we've just looked at is therefore acceptable for use above 18 metres. I think this is what you referred to earlier. It contains no caveat or qualification, does it?
No, it doesn't. No, I find it very misleading now when I read it back, knowing the background to it.
I see. Can we go up, please, to page 2? I want to look with you at the diagrams we discussed a little earlier, which you refer the reader of your type approval summary directly to. Do you remember?
Yes, yeah.
So if we look at those, please, I think you said in relation to these, and we can go back and check it if not, that you saw these and understood them to be standard design details, again, with no caveat or qualification as to any height restriction in terms of how they should be installed. Is that right?
That's right. We see these diagrams alongside that statement that K15 is suitable for use over 18 metres. No qualifications, no limitations. And so I think it's very misleading to put those diagrams there and then read those alongside the BBA certificate describing a non-combustible substrate, which you have in each of those 3 diagrams, and a limited combustibility cladding panel, which again, I believe we have in those 3 diagrams. So everything about those diagrams seems to lead you towards the 18-metre paragraph. And it left me with the impression that these three diagrams were all within the parameters of the test that allowed Kingspan to claim the 18-metre suitability.
On the basis that there is nothing there to say that these fall outside the parameters of that test.
That's right, yes.
So did you examine these diagrams and the wording around them during your assessment?
I would, yes, I believe I would have examined them and looking at the key factors, as in the combustibility of the substrate and the cladding panels.
Yes. All right. Can we go back now, please, to the BBA certificate, BBA 6038. And again to page 5, section 7. Thank you. If we go, in fact, I'm so sorry, down to page 6 and to section 7.3. Here we see the BBA advising as follows: in buildings with a floor more than 18 metres above ground level, advice should be sought from the certificate holder. Is that what you were referring to, Mr. Jones, when you said in the section of your statement that we've just looked through, the BBA certificate says that it's okay for use over 18 metres if Kingspan were to say so? That's
right, yes. Yes, this refers you to Kingspan. And of course, I was talking to Kingspan about this. So yes.
Yes. Did it strike you at the time as all a bit circular? The Kingspan cite their BBA certificate, and when you go to the BBA certificate, if you're looking to use the product over 18 metres, you're directed back to Kingspan.
Yes, I'm not sure if it did at the time, but it certainly does now. Yes.
All right. Can we go back to your witness statement, please, and to page 36? I'm afraid I was wrong. There is one more factor that we need to take a look at there, which contributed towards your judgment that the product was one of limited combustibility. And that's this, that's at H, the assertion in both the BBA certificate and the Kingspan literature that K15 is classified as a class 0 product, not in itself evidence of limited combustibility, as discussed under a previous question, but another piece of evidence which, viewed alongside all of the above, would have helped support the judgment that it was. Yes?
Yes.
In what way did you determine that a classification to class 0 helped support a judgment that a product was one of limited combustibility?
Only to link to one of my previous answers where I talked about class O products having a surface material that would more often than not be of limited combustibility, the very feature that allows it to pass a test to class 0. And the fact that in the case of K15, it's a solid block of insulation, so the material that has achieved class 0 on the surface is the same material all the way through. And again, this is not a direct link to limited combustibility, but it's another piece of background information. When I'm gathering the evidence to try and make a judgment one way or the other, it's another bit of background information that pushes me towards the conclusion I made.
All right. I want to ask you something else about H. I notice in the final line of that paragraph that you use the word would have helped support the judgment that it was. And in fact, I think you've used that in some of these other factors that you've set out for us. It may just be the way that it's been phrased, but just so that I'm clear, is it your evidence that you considered at the time each of these factors that you've listed here in your witness statement at A to H, or is it on having been asked about it that you have thought it through in this way?
No, I recall looking at each of those examples listed at the time and using them all to make a judgment.
I see. All right, can we go I'm going to look with you at the under H, the next paragraph, and just read from there. On the basis of my knowledge at that time, the range of evidence in A to H above was sufficient for me to make a judgment that K15 could be considered a material of limited combustibility. I was aware that if defined as a material of limited combustibility, it could in principle be used in stories over 18 metres in accordance with paragraph 12.7 of approved document B. But I was being told by the BBA certificate and the Kingspan literature that K15 had met the criteria for BR135, so had already been proved to be suitable for stories over 18 metres in any case. And going over, please, to page 37. Yes, at the top there, my type approval summary to LABC was only confirming something which was supposedly already known. Yes?
Yes.
Basically, is this right? You thought at the time that you were saying nothing new in your approval by calling this material one of limited combustibility.
That is right. I thought I was simply representing the information I'd been given, both verbally from Kingspan and in the documents they gave me. I honestly didn't appreciate at that time that using the words limited combustibility was opening any doors for Kingspan that hadn't already been opened by the information that was already available.
I see. When did you come to appreciate that using the words, the specific words, a material of limited combustibility would have the effect that you've just described?
I don't think I had cause to revisit in that context, in that detail, until I was asked to contribute to the inquiry in 2019.
Mr. Jones, did it not strike you as odd, if that is the case, forgive me, if that is the case and you were saying nothing new and K15 was a material of limited combustibility, did it not strike you as odd at the time that neither the BBA certificate nor Kingspan's own product literature said so?
I think perhaps I put a lot on that statement on the page 1 of the BBA certificate that appeared to me to be saying, to be describing a material that had a limited capacity to burn. And I made the link from that to limited combustibility.
Fine. Did you notice that neither the BBA certificate nor Kingspan's own product literature anywhere made the claim that K15 was a material of limited combustibility or could be considered to be one?
I think I probably did, but as I've said previously, I don't think at that time I was making a clear enough distinction between the specific phrase limited combustibility and a product which had a limited capacity to burn. I understand now that that's two very different criteria, but I don't think I understood that at the time. So the fact that the specific phrase limited combustibility wasn't used, I don't think it registered with me as being significant at that time.
I see. And at the time, you made your judgment on the basis of the matters we've just been through in some detail, and you considered at the time that your judgment was sound. Is that right?
Yeah, I did, yes.
All right.
And I was also aware, of course, that this was just the first stage and that this would go forward for further checking and verification.
Yes. Can we just go back, please, to your witness statement at page 33? I want to just look again with you at your answer to what your understanding was as to the meaning of the phrase limited combustibility in May 2009. Not sure that is the right page, actually. Just bear with me for a moment. Yes, actually, let's look at that section. You say there in response to question 52, I had made a judgment based on the range of statements and test results referred to in the documents reviewed that the product had a limited capacity to sustain fire and was therefore limited in its combustibility. You've just explained that you did not appreciate at the time the distinction between those two things. Just to be absolutely clear with you, were you aware in late 2008 and early 2009 that the words of limited combustibility have a defined and specific meaning within approved document B?
Yes, I knew of the reference in document B and Appendix A, yes.
I thought you said to us earlier, you must correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought you said to us earlier that it was from your analysis after the Grenfell Tower fire that you had come to understand that there was a specific and defined meaning for those words.
No, I knew of the Appendix A definition in the approved document from having read section 12 during my assessment of this product in 2008.
I see. But in section 12, I think you're talking about 12.7, it simply says in brackets Appendix A.
Appendix A.
Do you mean that you're aware that there existed a definition, or did you know what it was?
I knew that there existed a definition, but I would have been very much in a frame of mind at the time that that's an approved document definition, but there may be other ways of proving the functional requirement. And I think that's key to how I was trained to think as a building control officer, to read requirements in an approved document, but not just to reel them off verbatim, to understand why they were asking for what they were asking for. So in 12.7, I asked myself, why is approved document B asking for limited combustibility? What's the end objective of that? And of course, it is to make sure that the insulation product can't contribute to the development of a fire. And then, of course, I come back to the statement on page 1 of the BBA certificate, which tells me actually it does achieve this aim. So not via the definition in Appendix A, but via a more functional definition that says this insulation will not contribute to the spread of fire.
I'm not sure I follow. We'll come back to some of the substance of what you have just described in terms of your process of thinking, but in very basic terms, is what you're saying this: you were aware from paragraph 12.7 that there existed in Appendix A a definition of the phrase limited combustibility.
Yes.
You did not look that up and were not aware of what that definition was.
I believe I probably referred to it. I believe I probably did look it up. Yes,
Right.
I disregarded it.
I'm so sorry, did you say you disregarded
No,
it?
I wouldn't have disregarded it. I would have looked, I believe I would have looked it up, having seen it referred to in paragraph 12.7.
I see. So you saw it referred to in 12.7, you went to Appendix A, and then you decided, based on your training and different ways to meet the functional requirements of the building regulations, that you would give it an alternative definition. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. That I'd seen the other statements, and in particular that statement on the first page of the BBA certificate, that indicated to me that the functional requirement we would be looking for in an insulation panel, i.e. that it not contribute to the spread of a fire, is, in the opinion of the BBA, achieved, because they say so in that statement, albeit that it doesn't use the specific phrase limited combustibility.
Yes, I think I follow what you're saying. I'm going to come back to this, I'm afraid. You say that you did go to Appendix A and decided to come up with an alternative definition than the one you found there for a material of limited combustibility. I'm not sure that I'm clear on why you did that.
I think it was just a case of gathering the evidence I had and saying, okay, there isn't a test report that links to the definition of a limited combustibility that is in Appendix A,
No.
but there are other evidence that seems to suggest that it achieves that functional requirement that Appendix A is trying to ensure.
Did you not consider that you might be taking quite some risk in unilaterally deciding to step outside of the definition that is set out for you in approved document B and coming up with an alternative one?
Well, I think stepping outside of the strict criteria of the approved documents was an established practice in building control then. It was almost expected of us, you know, that we be prepared to look at alternative solutions in any given situation. In terms of whether I thought it was a risk, I think I probably read a great deal into the statement on the BBA certificate in terms of, you know, how this product performs when put in a fire situation.
The statement on the first page that the boards will not contribute to the development stages of a fire.
Yes.
All right. I think I follow to some extent, and you must forgive me, what you're saying about almost being expected to step outside of the approved document criteria because, and to come up with alternative ways of meeting the functional requirements. I think I follow what you're saying. I'm not sure that I follow that in relation to stepping outside of defined terms, specifically defined phrases. That is surely a different matter, wouldn't you say?
Perhaps looking at it now, yes, but at the time it was such an established practice that it is okay to put the approved document to one side and look at other evidence. That I just think that's what I was doing at the time.
I mean, did it occur to you that you were not on this occasion stepping outside of the confines or the language of approved document B on one building project? You were certifying a product which might go on to be used in hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of building projects, and stepping outside the defined criteria of a material of limited combustibility to do so. You were taking an enormous risk, weren't you?
I suppose I didn't see it that way at the time, because I knew that every actual building that was built would go through a full design and statutory approval process, you know, regardless of this LABC certificate. That every building would be approved on its own merits as a bespoke design. So I felt there were other layers of checking that would ensure it was used appropriately.
Yes, all right. Can we go, please, to Appendix A and specifically to Table A7? We'll find that at page, oh, sorry, I should give the document first. That's CLG 1607. Yes, 1607. And I'd like to go to page 121, please. So down a couple of pages. Oh, yes, I see. All right. So if you look on the right-hand side under the heading Materials of Limited Combustibility, we see there materials of limited combustibility are defined in Table A7. Yes?
Yes.
Do you think you looked at this?
I believe I would have, yes. I know, because it was referred to in paragraph 12.7.
All right, so let's go to Table A7, please, which is on page 132 of this document. And if you look, thank you, on the left-hand side of Table A7, we see sort of 3 rows down the words references in ADB guidance to situations where such materials should be used, yes?
Yes.
And then if you follow that column down, if we scroll down, please, to number 8, we can see this specific situation, insulation material in external wall construction, referred to in paragraph 12.7. Yes?
Yes.
And then in the right-hand column, we are given, if we scroll back up, please, we see the definition of materials of limited combustibility is given to us for national class in the left-hand section. And if we go back down, I'm so sorry, to number 8, we can see there that what can be defined as a material of limited combustibility for this situation is any of the materials in A, B, or C above, and I'll come to those, or D, any material of density less than 300 kilograms, it goes on, which when tested to BS 476 part 11. So rather than reading that any further, it is right, I think, that no one had suggested to you that K15 had at any stage been tested to BS 476 part 11, had they?
No.
You had seen no reference to a test to that part of BS 476?
No.
So K15 cannot fall within D. Would you agree with me?
I would, yes.
Let's go up, please, to look at A, B, and C. We just scroll up. We'll come back to A because it's going to take us to another table. B, again, this is a reference to particular results following a test to BS 476 part 11. And you've just agreed that you saw no reference to K15 being tested to that section. Yes?
Yes.
So it can't fall under B, can it?
No.
And at C, we see a description, any material with a non-combustible core, at least 8 millimeters thick, having combustible facings on one or both sides. It goes on. K15 is not a material described there, is it?
No, it's not.
Right, so we're left with A. Let's go up, please, to table A6 at page 131. And here we come to 4 more options, A, B, C, and D. If we can deal first, please, with A and D. Again, in A, you're asked to look at particular results to BS 476 part 11, and you knew of no such tests. Is that right?
That's right, yes.
So we can scrap that one. It can't, K15 cannot fall under A. Looking at D, please, products classified as non-combustible under BS 476 part 4. You had seen no indication of any testing at any stage to part 4 of BS 476 on K15, had you?
No.
Right, so it can't fall under D either, and we're left with B and C. B refers to totally inorganic materials such as concrete, fired clay, ceramics. It goes on. K15 is not one of those materials, is it?
No.
And we're left last with C, concrete bricks or blocks, meeting a particular British standard. Well, K15 is certainly not either of those things, is it?
No.
Mr. Jones, in the simplest possible terms, just following this investigative trail, which is set out for you in approved document B, rather than piecing together all the bits and pieces of evidence you appear to have picked up from the BBA certificate and Kingspan's own marketing literature, is it fair for me to say that had you carried out the exercise we have just carried out, within the space of about 8 minutes, you would have concluded that K15 is not a material of limited combustibility as defined within approved document B?
As per the document B definition, yes, I would agree. Yes.
Did you, in truth, carry out the exercise we have just carried out to establish whether or not this material meets the definition of non-combustibility in approved document B?
I can't recall, but I believe I would have referred to these tables. I'm not sure I can't recall the detailed process I went through. I think I was, my judgment was perhaps skewed by the impression I had, or what I'd been told, that this product had already, by virtue of BR 135, been given the okay to be used over 18 meters. So it was the fact that I didn't believe, in terms of the risk of the judgment, I didn't believe I was saying anything new as I looked at it at that time.
Do you accept, Mr. Jones, that had you simply followed the definitions within approved document B, as we have just done, you would never have ended up writing in a certificate for K15, this material can be considered a material of limited combustibility?
No, I would not. No, that's correct.
Do you think it is possible, in fact, that you simply did not know in late 2008 and early 2009 that limited combustibility carried a specific and defined meaning?
I think it is possible, yes, but I didn't understand the significance of that.
Do you think it's possible that you were unaware that it had a definition within approved document B?
Because I can't recall how I referred to the document. All I can say is that I believe that I would have referred to those tables simply because they were referred to in paragraph 12.7, but I can't recall how I went about it in that respect, so I can't say for certain.
All right, Mr. Jones, I'm going to pause you there for a moment. Just looking at the time, Mr. Chairman, I wonder whether this might be an appropriate time for us to take a short break.
It might be, but how are you getting on?
I'm doing fine for time, and this is a good point, as good a point as any.
All right, well, we'll take our mid-afternoon break a little earlier than usual, Mr. Jones. We'll come back at 3:30, please. And while we're having our break, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence or anything relating to it, all right?
All right.
Very good. Thank you very much. We'll see you at 3:30, please. Thank you very much. Welcome back, everyone. We're ready to continue hearing from Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones, just check that you're there, you can see me and hear me.
Yes, I can.
Very good. Ready to carry on?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you very much. Well, when you're ready, Ms. Troop.
Thank you. Mr. Jones, I'm going to take you back now in time. Do you remember we looked at an email from November 2008 when you first became involved in this process, and Phil Harrison of the LABC sent to your line manager, Chris Jenner, a PDF document called Type Approval Service Manual?
Yes.
If we can just go, please, to your second witness statement, which is HBC 6051, and to page 4. I want to look with you, please, at paragraph 14, where you're talking about that service manual. You say there, I cannot categorically say whether I saw the service manual or not at the relevant time. I may well have seen it, and a clue to this is that the £500 minimum fee I quoted, to which I referred in an email to Phil Harrison of the 14th of January 2009, that's the email I was just, no, that's not the email I was just talking about, as a later one, but seems to reflect section 4 of the guidance, yes?
Yes.
And then if we go over the page, please, to paragraph 16, oh no, down the page, I'm so sorry. So back up to page 4 and to paragraph 16, you say there, the manual confirms what I was told by LABC about accepting the content of the BBA certificate without further interrogation. And you refer there at the last line to section 3.3 of the manual, verification. Yes?
Yes.
Let's go to that, please. It's at HBC 6049. And if we go to page 17, we should find section 3.3 of the manual. There we are. Do you see under the heading verification?
Yes.
We see there the following: to ensure compliance, particularly in relation to some system and product approvals, the scope of assessment will perforce be wide. It should embrace verification of the following. And there are then a number of bullet points setting out certain checks or site visits or ongoing audits, yes?
Yes.
If we look at the paragraph under those bullet points, we see this. In the two circumstances marked above, the holding and submission by the customer of authoritative independent third-party verification, particularly if it is from a UCAS accredited source or other method recommended in approved document 7, is likely to indicate an acceptable level of satisfaction for our approval purposes and eliminate the need for any additional checking within that aspect. Is that the section to which you were referring?
It is, yes, and it links to what I was told verbally by LABC when I spoke to them in that first telephone conversation.
Yes. Can you remember now whether you picked up the advice to accept whatever the BBA was saying at face value from your phone conversation, or whether you additionally read this document at the time it was sent to you in late 2008, or sent to Mr. Jenner, I'm sorry?
Yes. My recollection was being told this or discussing this during that telephone conversation. But this document was within Herefordshire Council's possession at that time. So it's possible that I'd also read this document at that time. And that might have prompted me to ask during the telephone conversation, you know, what does this mean? My memory is a little bit fuzzy on that. When I wrote my first witness statement, I couldn't remember this document, although there are elements of it that I now remember being aware of.
Yes, all right. Can we go back now, please, to your first witness statement, HBC 60?
Sorry to interrupt you, Ms. Troop, but I'm just curious. On the page that we're looking at, the passage you just referred us to, with the double asterisk at the beginning, suggests that there may be some circumstances marked with double asterisks. Where are they?
It does. I'm afraid we haven't been able to discover the answer to that question. There don't appear to be any particular sections marked with a double asterisk. Oh, I'm being told, I think, that it's... I think, Mr. Chairman, that is a reference to section 3.3 itself and to section 3.2 above. Because do you see that at the end of the list of bullet points, there are 2 asterisks?
Oh, I see. That's meant to govern the whole of 3.3, is it?
It is. I think that's the answer.
I see. All right. Thank you very much.
Mr. Jones, can we go back, please, to your first witness statement, which is HBC 6029, and to page 41? If we go, please, to the 4th paragraph there, starting, I have no doubt. No, in fact, if we go just above that, this is a section we've looked at already, starting in terms of merit. Do you see it?
Yes.
And that's where you described your views at the time of Kingspan, a world leader in insulation products with a reputation for integrity, yes?
Yes.
You say at the end of that section, in reference to their product literature, would have been viewed not with unconditional acceptance, but with a degree of trust. And then going on, you say, I have no doubt that in 2009, with the level of experience and knowledge I had, I would have tended towards trusting what they were telling me in their literature. After all, their products had been researched and developed by people with extensive specialist expertise in the field, and the company was viewed as being one with integrity. It's fair to say, is it, that because of your own level of experience and knowledge in 2009, you would not have been in a position to challenge Kingspan as to any of their assertions?
No, I would say that would be true. I didn't have the specialist knowledge or experience that would be necessary to be able to say, hang on, what you're saying doesn't sound right.
The same is true, is it, in relation to anything asserted by the BBA?
Yes, that would be right.
And although you have said there that their assertions would not be viewed with unconditional acceptance, would you agree that the overall effect of the project you undertook seems to be that you did, in fact, unconditionally accept what you were being told, both by Kingspan and by the BBA?
Yes, certainly the BBA, and to some extent the Kingspan information as well, not least because the key points appeared to be supported by statements in the BBA certificate. Indeed,
the two documents supported one another, did they not?
Yes.
Yes.
They did, yes.
All right, I want to just look with you at some aspects of the evidence of some of the Kingspan witnesses. If we can go, please, just briefly to the witness statement of Philip Heath, which is KIN 3020709, and to page 60. If we look at paragraph 8.20, please, he says this: I cannot recall the LABC system approval being issued as a draft by Hereford. However, we would have checked the document in any event, and we would have identified any errors or any points of interpretation of the building regulations with which we did not agree. This did not mean that Kingspan assumed any responsibility for the accuracy of the certificate, which remained an LABC document. We considered the LABC and HCBCD, which is Hereford, to be experts, and that the certification would reflect their understanding and interpretation of the building regulations and approved document B. So we can see there that where in a sense you are saying that you relied on the specialist expertise and research and integrity of Kingspan. At the same moment, Kingspan say they were relying on your expertise. Do you see?
I do see, yes.
I can see that Mr. Heath says there that he cannot recall your system approval being issued as a draft. I think we know now that that was done and that you did send to Andrew Pack a draft of your certificate and summary. Would you have expected Kingspan to pick up any inaccuracies or errors in that certificate and summary?
I would. That was the expertise that they were bringing to the exercise. They knew the product, they knew how it could be used. I mean, they as a company were advising the industry on how it should be used. So that was expertise they had. And I expected them to be honest and pick up any inaccuracies. That's why I sent it to them, not out of any naivety, but at that time, I just wouldn't have imagined that a company in Kingspan's position would want to risk the reputational damage from knowingly marketing something with the wrong information.
I see. All right, can we go now please to the witness statement of Ivan Meredith, which is at KIN 30-22312 and to page 42. So it's KIN 30-22312. Thank you. If we look, please, at paragraph 92D, it's in about the middle of the page, starting, if you took no action, why not? And just to set it in context, Mr. Meredith was being asked there about this 2009 certificate and why Kingspan did not take any action in respect of its wording and technical content. There he says this: we were paying experts to make opinions based on our product properties and their applicability in accordance with building regulations. We supplied the product data, they would write the guidance. These bodies usually kept themselves in check, and we were clutching at anything that would support the use of our products and very busy trying to balance all the needs of the company's business development. Therefore, I believe it went unchecked properly by us. That being said, the documents were very cheap compared to normal Agrimon certificates that could cost £20,000 per year, compared to an initial £2,000 to produce the whole document. Focusing really there on the middle section, were you aware at any stage of your involvement in this approval certificate that Kingspan were clutching at anything that would support the use of their products?
No, I had no indication of that in any of our conversations or emails. It was never even alluded to.
No. Were you aware that Kingspan say they were relying on your due diligence and expertise?
No, I don't believe that to be accurate, because in terms of my involvement, it was very much a collaborative exercise that they were providing expertise to the process. It wasn't all on Herefordshire or on LABC.
No, but it was surely more on Herefordshire and LABC than Kingspan, who are, after all, the product manufacturer. You and the LABC are producing an approval certificate.
Yes, that is true, and it was my belief at the time that with my work then going to LABC for a further technical check, that there was a robust procedure in place to counter that.
Yes, all right. I mean, the reality is, putting it brutally, I'm afraid, is that no due diligence was carried out in respect of any of the assertions made in your type approval summary, was it?
It doesn't appear to be the case, or certainly there are some matters there that should have been flagged up as concern that weren't.
Yes. All right, can we go back, please, to your first witness statement at page 40? It's HBC 6029. Thank you. And if we look at your response, please, to question 68, I want to look in particular at the final paragraph there, where you say, I think a point to make here is that there was sometimes a great deal of pressure to consider and accept innovative solutions for clients, which did not necessarily follow rigidly the approved documents. Private building control bodies were frequently known to exploit local authority, going over please, stereotypes in their marketing. Go to the local authority and get tied up in red tape and rigid application of outdated approved document solutions. Come to us and we'll give you innovative and free-thinking approaches to compliance. You then go on to say, this did lead to pressure on local authority surveyors to be open to new products and innovative solutions, which the approved documents had yet to assimilate. And approved documents did tend to be several steps behind industry developments at any given time. You then go on to say, it was not uncommon for prospective clients to test our willingness to think outside the box before placing their business with us. Once you go down that road, the next question is where you find the evidence to support these alternative approaches. I want to ask you about that because given what you have said thus far in your evidence about the nature of approved document B, or the approved documents in general, the training you had to think more widely and to think outside of the approved documents and to come up with alternative routes or definitions, was that in part because of this pressure that you've described here?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Of course, I'm so sorry, I don't think I put it very well, or it's far too long. You told us earlier that when you were coming to form the judgment that K15 was a material of limited combustibility, you decided, in part as a result of your training, to step outside of the strict definitions within approved document B and to come up with an alternative, yes?
Yes.
And all I'm asking is whether that was in part related to this pressure that you've described in the section of your witness statement I've just read to you.
Yes, it was. Now, I think the important difference to point out is this is a principle that applied in our building control business, as in when we were dealing with building control clients, which was our bread and butter, if you like. That's what we did. So as far as this sort of limited exercise with Kingspan goes, there was no incentive for me to try and, please Kingspan or keep them happy in terms of future business, because there was no future business. Kingspan were not clients of ours. But I felt when I was writing the statement that perhaps it was important to point this out as the backdrop against which we worked. And it perhaps might explain why, when dealing with the Kingspan exercise, the way I went about it might have been influenced by the way I went about our normal building control activity.
I see. So more broadly, because of the pressures you've described here to think outside the box and come up with innovative solutions, that had become a way of working which may have affected the way in which you approached this assessment. Is that it?
That's right. Even though that incentive wouldn't have been there for Kingspan, it wouldn't have mattered to us whether we kept Kingspan happy or not, if I'm honest, because we weren't going to get repeat business. It wasn't part of what we did, but I'm sure that's the way we worked, and that would have come out in the way I approached this exercise.
Why do you say there was no incentive for Hereford and you weren't going to get repeat business?
Well, I mean, these type approvals, certainly the Kingspan ones were the only ones we dealt with, but they came along once in a blue moon. And the payment was inconsequential, really. £500 is about what we would have charged for the building control on a kitchen extension. So it was, in terms of our income, it was neither here nor there. It was inconsequential. So really, there was was no incentive for us to do these type approvals other than a sort of obligation to help LABC when they asked us to. And there was certainly no incentive to be overly generous to Kingspan, not deliberately, because, you know, this wasn't a source of income. This wasn't an income stream for us. They were small sums of money once in a blue moon, usually at a time when we were busy enough anyway and would rather not have the extra workload.
All right. I want to take you back, please, to the service manual we looked at earlier. If we can go back to that, it's HBC 6049. And if we can go, I think, to page 16. Yes, if we look, please, at section 3.2, assessment checking level of service, we can see this in the opening paragraph. It is vital for the type approval service that a high level of assessment is applied in order to secure user confidence, service credibility, and to avoid repetitive faults due to an initial oversight. Accordingly, all type approval projects should be comprehensively checked in all respects. Singular reliance upon a risk-assessed acceptance or other form of exclusions from full checking, or reliance upon previous examples, should only form a limited, controlled, and recorded part of any assessment process. Do you see that?
Yes.
Do you know whether or not you read that at the time you were carrying out your assessment?
I don't know. I was certainly aware of this second level of checking that LABC committed to. And my recollection is that this was discussed in the telephone conversation. But as with the discussion about the BBA certificates, I can't recall whether I'd read this section or whether it was just given to me verbally or both. But I was certainly aware of it.
Yes. So I know that this section goes on to discuss a second check and what is required in respect of a second check. Do you consider that the first paragraph of this section that I've just read to you is directed not to you, the author of the certificate and summary, but to LABC?
I believe it to be yes, because when we look at the bullet points which define the type of checking that might be carried out, yeah. That would have been LABC activity, not Herefordshire Council.
I see. And what about the section towards the end of the first paragraph that I've just read to you, which says that they should be comprehensively checked in all respects, and then goes on to say that singular reliance upon previous examples should only form a limited, controlled, and recorded part of any assessment process. If we think about that, it's fair, I think, for me to say that your type approval summary relied entirely on previous assertions which went unchecked by you. Is that fair?
Yes, in respect of the BBA certificate, yes.
Yes. But you consider that paragraph and the advice in it as to the level of quality was not directed to you and not for you to consider, is that it?
I read it to be a sort of a robustness to the process that meant that no one local authority could issue a document without it being verified by other means, to stop inaccurate information circulating in the wider industry.
I see. Do you consider that the work you carried out was of an adequate standard, Mr. Jones?
I think in terms of the scope of what I did, it matched what LABC had asked of us. But with hindsight, I don't believe that scope was adequate. I don't believe it should have been done to that sort of level.
I see.
And we've obviously looked at some of the work I did and appreciate that because of my lack of experience, some of it was not what should have been written.
So in terms of, given what you have said about the scope of the project as it was set out for you, what you're saying is that you did follow that and you did carry out that work adequately within the parameters of that scope, but the scope itself essentially broke this from the start. Is that fair?
I believe so. When I look back at the scope that was asked of us, £500 worth of work, I don't believe it was appropriate. The result of that sort of scope in terms of the certificate was always going to be very, very limited and barely scratch the surface. And I can see now with hindsight that when you work to a very limited scope like that, there's a high risk that you don't dig down into the real meat of it, in which case then it begs the question, should it be done at all? As in, you either do it fully or not at all.
Can we just go down, please, to section 3.5? I think it's on page 18. This is about resources and competency. LABC HQ and local authorities shall deploy sufficient experience and qualified staff to type approval projects in order that every application is given a high level of professional assessment and decision making, and so on. And then there are 3 bullet points above which the manual states, if a local authority is faced with resource or logistical problems in respect of any particular project or proposal, it should either seek to pass the project to another authority, refer the matter to the technical coordinator, or set up a joint working arrangement. As far as you are aware, was any consideration given at any stage, given your acknowledged lack of experience, to passing it to another authority or setting up a joint working arrangement or looking for any kind of formal help?
I think the consideration was that initial discussion between myself and Chris Jenner and between myself and LABC, where I was considering declining doing the work, not just for me, but for Herefordshire Council, and saying, actually, I don't think we have that expertise. And that would be in line with what this section of the document is saying. Actually, do we have the expertise? But it was actually that conversation with LABC where the very limited scope was discussed.
Yes.
Where we concluded that, yes, for that sort of scope, yes, perhaps we do have the resources and the competency to go as far as that scope needs us to go. And perhaps, in a different world, had all parties to that process been honest and open, then the result would have been very different potentially. But I think we did give consideration to it, and it was the scope given to us by LABC that allowed us to go forward.
All right. Referring back to what you said there about had all parties been honest and open, can I ask you this? Do you consider that you were misled during this process?
Yes, I do.
By whom?
I would say by Kingspan and by the BBA, although I don't know to what extent Kingspan influenced the content of the BBA certificate, with knowing now what was going on. But by both those documents, there were some very misleading statements, very misleading diagrams that seem to me now to be designed quite deliberately to lead people down a certain interpretation. It would have been so easy to include clarifications and caveats about what the testing actually related to, what the limitations on the use of the product in systems over 18 meters were. It would have been very, very easy to do, both in the Kingspan literature and in the BBA certificate. And it seems to me odd that there's almost a deliberate move not to include those clarifications and allow different interpretations by ordinary industry professionals like me, not specialists, but just ordinary industry professionals.
Yes. Yes, thank you. You've spoken a little about the checks that you understood would be carried out at the LABC when you had finished your part in this assessment. But I think we can go to it, if we need to, I think in your first witness statement, you actually say that you were not sure in 2009 what arrangements were in place or what those checks would comprise. Is that right?
That's right. I knew there was a checking procedure, and it's possible and likely that I saw that section of the manual. But of course, that lists out quite a number of different options for checking. So I didn't know which of those LABC would choose to use. They had access to every local authority building control department in the country, including the urban ones where high-rise buildings are the norm. They had access to technical consultants because LABC were marketing, I think, some technical consultancy services in the wider industry. So they had various options that they could have used to take my report and get it checked, but I didn't know what they proposed to do. I just knew they were going to do some level of checking.
Something, yes, yeah. All right. And you said to us earlier that knowledge was significant to you, and it provided you with some comfort when you carried out your work. Did you consider, did you flag up to anyone at the LABC that you were relying on them to check very thoroughly the work you had been done, or that you were expecting comments, or that you were concerned in any way?
I believe I did in that initial telephone conversation.
I see.
There was an exchange where I went from, actually, I don't think we can do this, to, oh, okay, if what you're saying is true about the scope and about the checking procedure, then maybe I can. And I think that in itself was an indication that the knowledge of the checking procedure was a key factor for us saying, yes, okay, we'll do it.
Yes. But you had no way of knowing, did you? I mean, I know it's difficult because we don't know who it was that you spoke to initially at the LABC, but you had no way of knowing whether that person would have any involvement at all in the final checks. So I suppose what I'm asking is, did you consider at a later stage, perhaps when you sent in your draft document, flagging up to the LABC again that you didn't in fact have any experience or knowledge of these areas, and that you were relying on them to check what you had done? Did you consider doing that?
No, I don't think I did. I think I trusted LABC to do what we discussed. I think I was aware that Herefordshire Council was a known quantity to them in terms of the type of work and expertise we had, and I knew that once I submitted the report to LABC, there was another process to go through. It was all in the manual and the process flow chart. So I think I trusted that they would do what was necessary, but I didn't pursue that with them again. I wish I had, if I'm honest, but no, I didn't.
All right. I want to look with you very briefly at another certificate for K15 issued by the LABC in 2013, and by that time it was called a registered details certificate. And I think you did have some involvement in it. If we can go to the certificate, please. It's at KIN 409546. Yes, so this is the certificate itself, and we can see on the left-hand side of the page that the date of issue is the 28th of August 2013, yes?
Yes, I can see
and that statement, and that statement is signed off by Barry Turner on behalf of the LABC. If we go on, please, to the drawings and document list which came with this certificate, that is at KIN 409547. Yes. You tell us in your first witness statement, I don't think we need to go to it, but if you need to, we can do, that this assessment, this renewed certificate, the assessment was undertaken by Colin Davis at Hereford Building Control, is that right?
That's right, yes.
And I think at that time you were his line manager, were you?
Yes.
Do you know how this assessment came to be the responsibility of Mr. Davis rather than you? Was it just because of your respective positions at the time?
Yes, it's because I was, as the manager of the department, I was doing far less technical assessment work at that time. But Colin was a fully practicing, very competent building control officer or senior building control officer. So I discussed with him taking the renewal.
Yes. All right. And did you review any part of this work before it went back to the LABC? Did you check?
I think I did. I believe Colin brought it back to me. He knew of my previous involvement, so I think after he'd done his work, I think I talked it through with him before he did his assessment, and probably did a review with him afterwards of what his findings were.
Can we just scroll down in this drawings and document list, please? Perhaps to the next page. Yes. And we see there it takes quite a different form than the one that you prepared, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
What I can tell you, we can go through it if we need to, but what I can tell you is that this renewed certificate does not contain the words K15 can be considered to be, or can be considered a material of limited combustibility anywhere. And all I wanted to ask you was whether you know why that particular wording was removed for this issue of the registered details certificate.
I think the document I created in 2008, 2009,
yes,
there was a version of that created for this renewal by Colin. He in fact took the original document and amended it, and the wording remains in that document. So it wasn't removed. It just doesn't appear in the part we're looking at now. In fact, the part we're looking at now was wording that was put forward by Kingspan.
In fact, this was suggested word for word by Gareth Mills of Kingspan, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yes.
All right. But you say, do you, that there's another part of this document which you think does contain the words material of limited combustibility?
Yes, as I say, it's the original document that I wrote in 2008, but amended by Colin Davis.
I see. And do you think that change was made at the LABC?
Which change? No.
The addition of this appendix that we're looking at.
This appendix was added by LABC, but in consultation with myself and Colin.
I see. All right, we might come back to that if we need to. I just want to look now, please, at some email correspondence from a little later in 2013. If we can go, please, to LABC 305351. If we can go down, please, to page 3, which is the bottom of that email chain. Yes, if we can zoom in on the last email chain there. That is an email chain from David Ewing of the LABC to you, dated the 19th of December 2013. Do you see that?
Yes, yeah.
And I would like to take you to the section. It's a bit dense, I'm afraid, but if you go after Hi Dave, if you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down to the section starting, I have also been approached. Do you see that?
Yes, yeah.
He says to you there, I have also been approached by Celotex, who have queried our interpretation of ADB in relation to the K15 product. I have no technical data behind our archive system, so can't dig into it. Essentially, the query is in relation to use of a PUR board in a position requiring fire resistance, particularly if it is used over 18 meters. ADB 4, 12.5 to 12.7, and definition of limited combustibility. Wondered if there was any testing undertaken to demonstrate the external boarding protected the internal core of the board, or any background on the research process undertaken. I appreciate this may have been some time ago, as I think it was originally a LANTAC certificate. I think that's a little bit confused in terms of its wording, but would you agree with me that essentially what Mr. Ewing is saying there is that Celotex are questioning the terms of the original certificate from 2009 in relation to limited combustibility?
That does seem to be how it's worded, yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
all right. So can we go up, please, to your reply, which comes the next day? So if we scroll up. I'm afraid, and up again. I think your email is quite a long one. And again, sorry, so page 1. You say there, "Hi, David. I'm not sure what specific issues have been raised by Celotex, but below are some extracts relevant to the fire performance and testing of K15. Firstly, from the BBA certificate. And then you have copied and pasted section 7, behaviour in relation to fire, from the BBA certificate into your email, yes?
Yes.
All right, let's scroll down, please, to the next section of this page. And then at the very bottom in the smaller blue writing, I think this is you again, you say, followed by an extract from Kingspan's own technical literature. And so now if we go over to page 2, please. That is, it's quite difficult to see, but that is the section we looked at earlier, isn't it, from Kingspan's marketing literature?
Yes.
Containing the phrase at the end of it, and is therefore acceptable for use above 18 meters, yes?
Yes, yes.
And then just below that, there's in blue, this is you again, and these from our internal assessment. And if we can scroll down again, please. Here you have copied and pasted sections from the type approval summary, the relevant sections, requirement B and B4 external fire spread, yes?
Yes.
So scrolling down a little more, please, to the bottom of that page, you say at the bottom there in blue, essentially, as the board is described as class 0, it can be termed a material of limited combustibility. And so in terms of the relevant part of Doc B, it is suitable for use within the wall construction, even at heights over 18 meters. Do you remember writing that, Mr. Jones?
I don't remember writing that, and that seems to be a real simplification. I mean, I've sent all the background to the judgment, but I haven't. It's a very simplistic way of writing it. I can't recall that.
I'm not sure it's a simplification. It's inaccurate, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. And the reason I wanted to ask you about this is because in your evidence earlier, you seem to be very clear that many years before this, in 2009, you were very clear as to the difference between class 0 and limited combustibility and how those things related to one another. In fact, you went so far as to say that you described the confusion in industry about that matter, confirmed that you had no confusion in your mind on that issue. And in fact, I think you said that you were required to understand it well enough to correct the misunderstandings of others. Is that right?
Yes, and I still believe that to be the case, yes.
So how did you come in 2013, at the end of 2013, to be saying, in response to a request from the LABC for an explanation as to how your type approval certificate said what it said, how do you come to be saying this to David Ewing of the LABC? Can you explain that?
I can't explain that, other than that it's wrong.
Do you think it might be the case, Mr. Jones, that you were not quite so clear in your own mind in 2009 or even in 2013 as to what class naught and or limited combustibility might have meant?
I believe that I was clear on it. It was quite a fundamental requirement. I don't think for me there was the sort of ambiguity that sentence suggests.
No, but that sentence is very clear. Do you have any idea how you can have come to write that? It's just an aberration, is it?
It is. I can only say it had been so long since I'd had any detailed involvement in this that I've written a very simplistic account of how I arrived at the conclusions.
Well, again, forgive me, but it's not simplistic. It's just wrong, isn't it?
It is wrong. Yes.
Yes. All right. Do you know whether David Ewing went back to Celotex with that explanation? Did you hear any more about it?
I don't believe I did. No.
Right. Other than this and this series of emails, were you at any stage made aware of any concerns or complaints from any individual or organisation in relation either to the 2009 certificate for K15 or to the 2013 certificate for K15?
I can't recall being made aware of any. No.
All right. But Mr. Jones, at this stage, I can tell you that I've come to the end of my prepared questions for you, but I'll hand back over to the chairman because we need now to take another short pause.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, Mr. Jones, at this stage, we have a short break so council can check that there aren't any questions that she's omitted to ask, and also to allow other people following the inquiry to suggest possible further questions. So we'll have a break until 4:30, and at that point we'll find out whether there are any more questions for you. All right?
All right.
And usual instruction, don't talk to anyone about your evidence, please, during the break. All right, see you at 4:30 then. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. We'll now see if there are any further questions for Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones, just to check up, can you see me and hear me clearly?
Yes, I can.
Very good. We'll now see whether Ms. Troop does have any further questions for you. Ms. Troop.
Yes, just one further question,
Just one.
Mr. Jones. And it's this. We've been through a great deal of evidence in just one day, and we've discussed a number of issues. And I want to ask you this, looking back over all of that, is there anything that you would have done differently?
From where I now stand, the thing I would have done differently was go with my first instinct right at the very start and say, I don't believe we're equipped to do this exercise.
Yes, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Mr. Jones, it's right that I should thank you on behalf of not only myself, but the whole panel for making yourself available today to give us your evidence. I'd like you to know that it's been extremely valuable to us to hear what you have to tell us. So we're very grateful to you for coming along to do that. And that is all the questions we have for you. And so you're now, as it were, free to go about your business. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And that's the end of the hearing for today. We will resume at 10 o'clock on Monday with another witness.